I've been travelling across Europe over the last year to compete in the Worlds Race, where the top 16 advance to the World Qualifying Points Playoff. And where did I finish? 17th. So as you can imagine, I am a bit gutted. To lock top 16, I had to make top 64 at UK Nationals, and I finished 97th. Voiceless Voice was of course not the best deck in the room, but I do think it is a lot better than people give it credit for, especially when Voiceless does have a very good Tempai matchup. And moving forwards into the new meta, it is a nice deck to consider if your budget is not big enough for Fiendsmith cards. After Euros, I will do a fancy video recapping my Worlds Race journey, and if you are new, then consider sticking around for it by pressing the big red button. But with no further ado, enjoy!
Perfectly balanced is all things should be.
So onto the main deck, I played 45 cards. I chose to play 45 because there's a decent number of cards in the deck that you don't want to draw, and also it gives us a better ratio with most of our hands of drawing to engine and to non-engine. So we have the obvious free low, free diviner. I don't actually think that this engine with Trias is mandatory at all. I think though that if you don't play this, you do have to play Branded Fusion. The reason being is that Branded Fusion is really good at pairing with other cards in your deck. For example, Branded Fusion plus Saphira is a much better pair than Diviner Saphira. But in the end, I went with playing Diviner and not playing Branded Fusion. I wanted to not have the Fusion lot going second, because an issue that I found was going second when I used Branded Fusion and then got interrupted would be that I would kind of need to link climb, and you of course can't do that with Branded Fusion. Also, I'm really good at drawing Albaz, and then we also have the Old Man. The Old Man of course is not great to draw, but if you go too high of a deck count, it becomes really bad to draw, like more towards 50. The card isn't actually that bad to draw in like 40, which sounds really weird. The reason for that is because in 40, you're drawing cards like Saphira and pre-prep a lot more, so you have more ways to make this card live if it's in your opening hand. And in 45, where it's like in between, it's pretty fine. Sometimes it's really bad to draw, other times it's okay. Worst case, you can just use it as tribute fodder if need be, and then add it back with Blessing later. Then I played 4 Rituals with 2 Cerebus and 2 Skull. A lot of builds also play the Odd Eyes. I play it in the side deck. I get the reason to main deck it because it's really good to have against Tempai. If they make you go first and they're playing 40, it's most likely Tempai. What I found though is that it doesn't actually make a huge difference whether you have this card in your main deck or not against Tempai, because when you get hand trapped a bunch, you don't normally get to the end board with this. And even when you do, it's probably not making a massive difference anyway. It can make a difference occasionally, but I didn't want to factor in the hands where I would have to then draw this card going second against decks like Snake Eye. Whereas drawing this card going second is actually pretty good because it can stop stuff like Imperm, Veiler, Mourner, and Princess. Then on to some other cards. We have free Prosperity, free pre-prep. We're playing 45, so there's not really much of a risk of drawing multiples of these. Free Barrier. There is definitely a logic to side one out going in second against Snake Eye, and I definitely used to, but I don't do that anymore because what often happens is you activate one, and then they'll go Flamberge, bring up IP, make SP and banish it, so it's a really huge punish if you actually draw 2 of this against Snake Eye, because it makes their SP banish pretty much irrelevant. And we have Blessing. This card is incredible. It's probably the reason why I was so keen on playing this deck, aside from of course being very familiar with it. It is insane in grind games. It's really good against Tempai because it makes your monster become Marshmallow. It lets you also dodge Skill Drain because you can do stuff like normal summon low, low Chain Link 1, Blessing Chain Link 2, Tribute off low, and then low resolves through Skill Drain so you get to the trap card, and then trap card can then pop the Skill Drain. In general, this card just does so much for the deck, it's really, really strong. Unfortunately though, I was really good at drawing this card in game 3, hence my 8 and 3 finish and not 9 and 2 finish. And then we also played 2 Prez. This card is of course not ideal to draw, but it can be pretty fine in certain hands. There are also builds which people haven't really looked at too much, where you can play one of this card, because you can play one of this, and then cut pre-prep, and then play one less Saphira, and then you can also play Branded Fusion, and my deck works pretty fine still, and the idea with that is you then draw this card less, and you can recycle it with Blessing every turn. I chose to not play that build though, because pre-prep is an insane card, and you don't really get to use pre-prep that well if you're only playing one copy of Prez. I played hand traps over breakers because I felt more safe playing hand traps into a wider format. Also, I didn't feel comfortable playing board breakers against a room full of Tempai players, which ended up being, I think, the right call because I faced 5 Tempai. So I played 3 Ash. This is the most generic one, but can also be the worst one against Snake Eye because it is Fire, 3 Veiler, 3 Imperm. These are like, I think, the better ones against Snake Eye. Then we have 2 Ogre because it's decent enough against Snake Eye, and I expected to face quite a few Tempai as well. Then I played 2 Nibiru. So the reason behind playing 2 Nibiru is that in my deck somewhere I wanted to play 3 of this card, and by maining 2 and siding the third one, I then had a bit more wiggle room in the side deck. And also the cool thing with playing this card in Voiceless is that if you draw this card in a matchup where it's not very good, like Tempai, it can just be used as tribute for a ritual summon. And then for the 14th hand trap, I play 1 Magnamute. This card is very good in this deck because it searches for Saphira, so even when it doesn't feel high impact, it always at least gets you to Engine. And then the last 3 cards in the deck that I played was 3 copies of Fenrir. I played this card because I figured there would be a lot of hand trap decks, and this card is really good in hand trap wars. And also, because this card is level 7, it pairs really well with Saphira, because you can just go Fenrir, search Fenrir, and then use Saphira to tribute off the excess Fenrir to get into your Voiceless combos. Generally speaking, it can be quite risky to play Fenrir with Magnamute and Nibiru, because of course these cards give you a monster on the field, so you can't use Fenrir, but there is a card in the extra deck that you will see in a moment that lets us play Fenrir with Magnamute and with Nibiru. And then onto the extra deck we have V1 Animar as the only Link 1. I did not play the Almirage and Secure combo because it didn't really come up that much. Even though I drew Blessing a lot, I didn't really miss it at all. I think the only reason why I would play it would be if I also played Heater, because then I could also use Almirage as a way to make Heater as well. Then I played 2 Mondo. I've normally been playing 1 in almost every build. I did want to play 2 though because of the Kashtira cards being quite popular currently. I did not want them to rip this with Unicorn. The spice was we played 1 copy of Haggard Lizardus. So what this card does is you banish it from field and then draw a card pretty much. If you use Magnamute or Nibiru on their turn, you can then clear your field in your turn to then make space for Fenrir. This card was really good, and it was actually one of the cards that I summoned the most. Then we have SP, fairly standard, and we have a Charmer Engine of Liner, Dark to then climb up into Selene, which can then climb into Access Code, and I also played a Goddess as well, which of course is really good for Pearly, because you don't have an out to a big noir otherwise. But it can have some other nice applications too, like in the mirror match for example. Against pure Kashtira it also comes up, because sometimes you can't push enough into their board if they shifter you. So what you can do is you can make Dark, take Shifter, and then link off their Shangri to make this, and then clear their field. Which isn't amazing, but it can sometimes be the only thing that you can do under Shifter going second. And then for the non-link cards we have a Goddess to make with Trias and Low. Then we have Meteor Burst because I side deck for Odd Eyes. And we have Arclight and Entus for Diviner. Some people do not play Arclight, but I think it's really important because, for one, if your Diviner gets Ogred, you need this to send, or if you open up Diviner plus Trias, having this makes a big difference as well, because you can then chain block the Diviner, so I can't Ash that. And then finally we have Typhon, because this card of course is pretty important, and I think should definitely be in any deck that has the space for it. 1 Odd Eyes, this comes in pretty much every matchup going first, and in matchups like Branded and Chimera, I even put this card in going second, because summoning this card into their board to negate Branded in red or Chimera Fusion can be quite nice. It's really good against Branded in particular, because this card negates effect, not activation, so it does get around Branded Lost. And then one of my favourite cards that has been in so many decks that I've played this season is Phantasme. This card does a lot for the deck because it helps you hand fix, which is really important in the deck with quite a few bricks, and is also level 7. Then I play Druid Worm. This is mostly for Branded, because when you use Magnamut, you don't want to have only Engine to search against Branded, you want to have another Bestial to search, so that you can stop the Branded in red. Then we have the third Nibiru, because this card pairs really well with Phantasme, and my main idea post-siding against Snake Eye going second was putting in these, and also putting in Lightning Storm, Duster, and Cosmic. So Storm, of course, if you use Phantasme, Nibiru, or Magnamut, you cannot use, but like with Fenrir, you can just make the Haggard Lizardos to then clear your field, and then play Storm. The idea with this is that it's really good into skill drain, and they will normally have other cards to clear as well, like Temple. Cosmic is really good into the fighting build, and it's also pretty good into Pure and Kashtira as well, because what you will often find is that they will use Flamberge to bring up IP fairly early, because they'll use it in response to Barrier being activated, or if you have a Saphira in the graveyard. So they won't normally be playing around Cosmic with Temple too much, because they will be inclined to bring up the IP with Flamberge before you've even summoned a monster. And then for the last few cards, we just have some things for going first, which is Called By, which is good for Droll, Ogre, Ash, Shifter. In general, although Voiceless is really good at beating hand traps, you do have some weaker hands which can just pass to one hand trap. It's also really good against Tempai if they go first, because the Tempai game plan going first is Seals into Drago, and you can just Call By Seals and they lose. And then I play 3 Judgments. I play this over D-Barrier because it has more coverage, and also helps with beating droplets. And yeah, after all the events in Europe that I've been to this year for the World Points race, this is the final list that I landed on, and I definitely enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, hopefully you enjoyed and or found this video useful. If you have any questions, put them down below and I will make sure to answer. Have a perfectly balanced rest of your day, and yeah, adios.